welcome to this week's Make It Monday. I'm Dawn McVey, and this week I've got a fun challenge for you using pattern stamps over the top of image stamps. I hope to give you a bit of inspiration and a few ideas to not only help you with this challenge, but with layering colors as well. Okay, so let's get right to the projects. For this particular technique, you're going to want to find some set from your collection that is some sort of a pattern that you can use for an all-over pattern overlay on your stamped project. So for today's projects, I'm going to use the new cover-up grid stamp set, but of course any of the cover-up sets work great for this. There's hexagons, diamonds, quatrefoil, any stamp set that you've got in your collection that is kind of just an all-over pattern will work great for this. The other thing you're going to want to find is a set. For today's purposes, I'm going to be using Grand's Garden, just because I love to work with flowers and it's a great versatile floral. But the nice thing about this one for this particular project is that there is a big solid stamping surface, so that pattern, when we put that grid over the top, it's really going to show up on those flowers. So it doesn't have to, you don't have to use flowers. Any sort of image that's got a big kind of a solid stamping surface would work really well for this technique. You could also use outline images that have a big open space and then color them in, and it will kind of serve the same purpose as that big open solid image. You just want a big solid block of color. The other nice thing about this particular set is I know a lot of you already have this in your collection, so hopefully this will make it a fun challenge for you to be able to play along with, because you can already see how it's going to work with something that you already have. If you don't have it, obviously just pull out any set that you've got that has a big solid work surface or stamped surface. So to get started, I already know in advance that I am going to want to use the Sentiment Splits Curve vertical die. Oh goodness, Windsor. Windsor decided to play along with today's Make It Monday challenge. Anyway, I already know that I'm going to want to use the Sentiment Splits Curve vertical die, and because of that, I've cut my cardstock to be just slightly bigger than this die. I want to do all my stamping first, and that way when I die cut, there's a nice seamless transition between the two pieces. If I went ahead and die cut first and then tried to stamp, there might be a bit of a gap there, and it wouldn't look like one solid flower, for instance, if that flower gets cut in half. So stamp first, die cut later. So I'm going to set that aside, and also for today's purposes, I am going to be stamping 3 cards using the exact same technique, same layout. Everything about the cards is going to be the same except for the color of cardstock or the color of ink that I'm going to stamp that overlay in at the end of the project. I just want you to be able to see how just by choosing a different ink color, you can totally change the look of your stamped project. So you might want to do one card just based on whichever color you like best, whichever type of look you like best, or you might want to do multiple cards and end up with a whole pile of cards when you get done with this. So either way is totally fine. Also, I am going to be using, I've got 2 stamp sets here just to speed things up a bit. So I am going to go ahead and get all of my flowers stamped here. And this is just a sticky mat from Cricut that I've cut down to fit inside my Misty stamping tool. That is not my genius idea. That was my brilliant friend Betsy's idea. It just is really quick and easy for keeping things in the Misty when you're trying to stamp without them kind of shifting around on you. You don't have to fiddle with magnets. I do like my magnets, but sometimes when I want to be like really quick, this works a little bit faster. So I'm going to get all of my flowers stamped. I'm going to speed this process up a bit so that you don't have to watch the whole thing, and then I'll get back with you. So one little tip for you when you're playing with color, especially in the case of stamp sets that are 2-step stamps, go ahead and stamp your second color over the top of your first one before you start adding more colors, more flowers, more images around the first ones, because this allows you to see what those colors are going to look like once they're layered over the top of each other. In this case, I've used a pink with an orange overlay, but the orange changes colors a bit when you lay it over the top of pink. So in order to make sure that the next colors that I add around here are really going to complement these two, I need to see what these two are going to look like together first. So I go ahead and stamp the 1 and 2 steps on each flower before I move on to the next type of flower, and then I'll do its second step, and then I'll do the next type of flower and its second step. And that way I just make sure that my whole color palette is pleasing to the eye, rather than if I stamp all of the first layers and then I start adding the second layers, I don't really know what those colors are going to look like together as I'm layering them on top of each other. So hopefully that will help you a little bit when layering color. Okay, so now that I've got my floral panel entirely stamped, I'm going to go ahead and add the pattern overlay, in this case a grid pattern, over the top. And the first one I'm going to do, I'm just going to stamp in a really monochromatic color. I'm going to use Hibiscus Burst, which is the same color that I used as the base for a lot of the flowers. And as you can see, there's just a wee bit spotty, and in some cases I like that look, but for today I want it to be really clear, solid grid. So I'm going to make sure and get that inked really well. And now I'm going to move on to do the exact same thing, only the next time I'm going to stamp it on one of the other panels in Smoky Shadow, and then the last one I'm going to do in white. So as you can see, it's created 3 very different looks. The monochromatic, the pink, is just really kind of nice and neutral. It blends in really well. And yet there's definitely a pattern there that kind of stands out. The black, well, Smoky Shadow, obviously is a lot more dominant. It just adds another nice little layer of texture and interest to your card. And of course the white is really unique. It's really subtle, but I love that extra bit of depth that it adds to those flowers. Because I used Fresh Snow ink, that's a hybrid ink, so you're going to want to be a little bit careful with this one. It will smear a little bit until it's dry. So make sure that you use a heat tool to dry that, or set it aside until it's dry before you start die cutting. But I am going to go ahead and get these pieces die cut, and so I'm going to cut the top with the Sentiment Splits Curve Vertical die, and then I'll just trim off these little bits that are going to be left around the edges, and I'll be right back with you. So after I die cut those pieces, this is what I'm left with. So I'm going to trim these little bits off the sides here, and I'll just trim down the edges here to make sure that it is the same width as the top portion, and then it'll be ready to pop on the front of my card. Okay, so to wrap things up, I am going to use the Sentiment Staples Sending You stamp set for my sentiment, and I've gone ahead and die cut some double-ended banner dies. The die has 2 banners, so I went ahead and just cut out multiples, even though they're different size. It doesn't matter because I'm going to be trimming off the edge. And I went ahead and stamped the large Sending You from the set, and then I've got a little companion sentiment which says a great big hug, and I'm going to use that on the card front as well. So I've got my card base already laid in my MISTI here, and I'm using this isn't adhered yet, but I'm using it as a guide so that I can position this little sentiment along the curve of that die cut. And it's a straight sentiment, but I've just placed it in the MISTI, and then using the cardstock as a guide, just went ahead and curved it to fit that curve. And so I'm going to go ahead and stamp that on all 3 of my card bases. All right, so to finish things up, I'm just going to pop each of these little banners on my die cut floral panel. One on each. I just want to line that up so that it's straight with that grid. And then I'm just going to use some paper trimmers, paper snips to snip off the side of the banner. And then this piece is ready to get popped on the front of a card. And because there's just a little bit of a gap, oops, between the top panel and the bottom panel, because I want there to be that gap there for the sentiment. When I pop these on the front, I'm also going to need to trim off just a tiny bit off the top and the bottom, just to make sure that it's level with the card front. But otherwise, that is going to finish these off. I just did that quickly in my paper trimmer, so it makes it a nice straight edge, and it's super fast. So there you have 3 totally different looks for the same technique. And like I said, you can do, just pick one that you love to do based on how the colors work together, or do a series of 3 if you'd like, or you can even change it up and use like maybe the same grid color, but maybe do a grid and a quatrefoil and a diamond on a different one. So you can do 3 different cards that way, but using all the exact same colors. You can have a ton of fun with this, and I just love how that white grid looks laid over the top of those flowers. So I cannot wait to see what you guys come up with. Hopefully these ideas have given you some inspiration to use in your own card making this week. If you'd like to play along with the challenge and be entered to win this week's Make It Monday contest, just head to the Paper Tray blog where you can add a link to your project. I hope you'll play along. I'd love to see your take on the challenge. And of course, there's a Paper Tray gift certificate up for grabs too. That's it for me today, but thanks so much for watching, friends. This has been Dawn McVey with Make It Monday.